In a week when the White House threatened both missile strikes and immigrant raids, President Donald J. Trump launches his bid for another 4 years. Are enough American voters still buying what he's selling? Ahead of this week's Democratic debates, challengers blast frontrunner Joe Biden and propose legalizing prostitution. Has the party of Obama and Bill Clinton drifted too far to the left? And here at home, outrage from the city's top cop after another violent criminal cut loose by the system reoffends. Is law and order going dangerously soft in Harris County? I'm Greg Rugen, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, conservative attorney and Second Amendment expert Michelle Byington. Next up, Fox 26 chief legal analyst Chris TRITICO. In the 3 spot, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart, Texas. Batting cleanup, Craig Jackson, professor at Texas Southern's Thurgood Marshall School of Law. Next up, well-known conservative blogger Kathleen McKinley. And closing us out on the hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's get going. Claiming America's future never looked brighter, the 45th President of the United States this week formally asked the nation for an additional 4 years to, in his words, keep America great. Speaking in the key battleground state of Florida, Mr. Trump launched his re-election bid by insisting he'd kept his promises and delivered a higher degree of prosperity. He also warned that a Democratic victory in 2020 would leave the United States in the hands of left-wing extremists.
Our radical Democrat opponents are driven by hatred, prejudice, and rage. They want to destroy you, and they want to destroy our country as we know it. Not acceptable. It's not going to happen.
Multiple polls show the president trailing in key battleground states, although many of the same surveys projected similar results in 2016. And Bob Price, we know how that turned out, right? We touched briefly on this last week, but if new polling is to be at all believed, Texas could be a swing state in 2020. And because Bob Price did pick the last presidential election right on the money, what's your take on the president this week?
I think these rallies that the president has are an amazing show of support that continues not only to be consistent but to grow. I covered the president when he was here in Houston for a rally last summer, and people camped out overnight in advance of these things to be there. It's not like they just show up and go in. They want to be in there. They want the good seats. They want to see this president. They want to hear his message. They want to recognize him for the success that he has had in delivering his promises to the American people.
Okay, this president is someone who comes to the next re-election campaign with a record. Chris TRITICO, what's your read out there on the American public? Do you think these polls are right, that the president is below 50%?
Well, look, if the polls are right, almost 55% of the public knows how to keep America great, and that's not re-elect Donald Trump. But we have to remember that Donald Trump was elected on an electoral college victory, not a general election victory. And that's two entirely different things. And he went to the key states, the key counties, and won that in a tactical election victory. And that's not the same thing that we're talking about when we're talking about polls.
Kathleen, you've been following the president.
Yes.
What kind of position is he in at this stage of the game?
Well, I don't believe that Texas is a swing state at all. This is everything that surprised us election night, right? And it's because I don't think people were telling polling exactly, who they were going to vote for. That's why it was such a surprise. I think that's going to be even more so this time because there's been such a demonization of Trump supporters that even like regular people who really don't like Trump, but they think, the Democrats are really going off the far left deep end, they're never going to tell a pollster they're going to vote for him, but when they go in there, they're going to vote for him because of the economy. So I think maybe the polls are even more screwed up this time than last time.
Tony, is that a fear of yours that that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left in order to attract the independents they're going to need to push this president out?
Not at all. I think the centrist play isn't going to work. And if you look at how close the elections really were, first of all, as we said earlier, Hillary actually won by popular vote. She lost by the Electoral College. Again, there's about 80,000 votes in different cities that change, in different towns, different states that change the electoral makeup. And additionally, you know, Republicans can tell themselves all they like that Texas is not in play. I know they stay up at night and they count 200,000 sheep because that's how close, Beto came to knocking out Ted Cruz. Of course, Ted Cruz is despised by his own party, so that's kind of a hard comparison. But 200,000 votes from now, it's going to be a whole new state. I don't know if it happens tomorrow, in 6 months, or by 2020, but it's going to happen. The question of is, when will it happen? And I hope Republicans will be reasonable right now and make this chance to reach out to Latino communities, because right now it seems like the guy at the top of their ticket hates Latinos. Okay, Michelle Byington, does that sound like a formula for a re-election of this president?
Let's look at the facts, Greg. Unemployment is at all-time lows, 3.5%. Among African Americans, 3.6%. Among women, 3.5%. Look at the economy. It is booming. We have got employment through the roof. And then let's take a look at oil production. We surpassed Saudi Arabia back in 2018. Trump came a couple months ago to Crosby to discuss his removing of red tape for pipeline construction, which is huge business here in Texas, which will make Texas not a swing state, because with Trump in office, it means jobs for Texans.
Craig, as you watch what's unfolded over the last 2.5 years, do you think Americans want another 4 years?
No, absolutely not. And I think you're going to see that in Texas too. I think you're right, Tony. The 2018 election showed that Texas could be in play. And one thing, Texas has been a Democratic state before. George W. Bush turned it into a Republican state, but I do think you have to look at what the past of the state. More importantly, the cities are bluer now. Mm-hmm. The cities are bluer now than they've ever been. So I think you have to watch Texas. It's going to turn Democratic maybe this election, maybe next election. We'll see.
Bob, we keep hearing about a divided nation. Divided the heartland and the coasts. Mm-hmm. You take away California, Washington, Oregon, and then the East Coast, we are completely separate. Do you think that's going to play out in the next election?
Well, for the last several elections, it's been rural America versus the urban America. And you're definitely going to see that play out this time. I disagree with Kat on this. I do think Texas is in play, especially if they pick Robert Francis O'Rourke as the VP candidate or Mr. Castro from San Antonio. So either one of those puts Texas definitely in play. And it would be a smart move on the Democrats, whoever the nominee is, to do that. The interesting thing that came out this week, I thought, was the professor who's picked the last 9 elections in a row successfully said that Trump will easily win re-election.
Okay, Chris Tritico, I want to ask you, do the Democrats need a moderate, established voice in order to attract independents?
Well, you're watching this unfold with this huge field, and they are attacking really hard to the left. But you see that in every primary. I think that they go to the extremes and then try to come back to the middle. And sometimes you get too far to the extreme. It's hard to get back to the middle in a short time after the primary. So if you get too out there, it may be hard to get back to the middle. But I don't know how far into the middle you need to be in this race, because Donald Trump is way to the right already. And so I don't know how far you need to get to the middle. There's so many people that are polarized already. So I don't know about that. But I want to get back to Texas real quick. You only need one county left in Texas to turn this state blue. And remember, Fort Worth voted for Hillary by 1,000 votes, and that's one county left.
Okay, we may not know everything, but we do know this. We're going to talk about that subject again. Okay, when we come back, tensions approach the boiling point between the U.S. and Iran. Is the Trump administration pushback righteous, or are we provoking another costly war? That topic front and center after the break. Welcome back. The President of the United States claims he was cocked and loaded to launch a deadly military strike against Iran, but decided against it due to the likelihood that scores of people would die.
They shot down an unmanned drone, plane, whatever you want to call it, And here we are sitting with 150 dead people, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was proportionate.
Critics of the president are calling Mr. Trump's Middle East saber-rattling extremely dangerous business in the most volatile political landscape on the planet. Other analysts say the commander-in-chief has talked tough in the past, but always stepped carefully back from the ledge in the best interest of the United States. With that, I ask our panel, what's your point? Professor Jackson.
Well, you know, I'm glad he pulled back, and I'm glad he didn't. He took an opportunity to consider the proportionality principle in international law that you have to, when you do retaliate, your retaliation has to be proportional. But let me get this straight. He says he greenlit the operation based upon Situation Room and analysis reports that he received. And then as the planes were in the air, he asked the question, how many people would be killed? And that's when he found out that 150 people would be killed. Now, every source that has talked about how these things are planned says that's not how it happens. It happens, I mean, the military usually gives a body count during the planning process. So it appears, at least the people who know about these kinds of things, that he should have known and should have been told about the body count earlier on in the process. So he basically, if this is correct, greenlit an operation knowing the body count and then decided not to do it later on.
Byington, you agree with that?
Oh, here's the deal. Iran is a disaster, and this saber rattling, Iran is the one who is the bad guy here, not the U.S. They attacked 2 oil tankers last week. They attacked 4 commercial vessels the previous month. And you expect us not to do anything, especially when the world's oil supply is at risk here. And not only that, in the Strait of Hormuz, where these incidents occurred, you've got a drone that is shot down as well. And you expect the U.S. not to do anything. And the thing with President Trump, he can show restraint while simultaneously saying, hey, Iran, you better cut this out or there will be serious consequences.
Chris TRITICO, you've seen brinkmanship in the courtroom. You know, is that what the president's doing? Is this just part of a strategy?
Well, we had to do something. And I don't know how this came about, but the New York Times reported yesterday that it was Tucker Carlson, actually, who talked to the president and said, if you retaliate and do this, you won't get reelected. And I never thought I could form this thought in my head. Thank you, Tucker Carlson. That hurt more than I thought it would. But if that's true, then Tucker Carlson did the country a big favor, because we did not need to bomb Iran. That was out of proportion. And so I think the president made the right move in not retaliating with bombs. There's a better way to do this than that way.
Okay,
but
Bob,
I agree, we needed to do something.
Bob Price, with your sources in Breitbart, can you confirm what Chris said?
I can't confirm what Chris said, because I don't know. So anyway, it's great to see that our Democrat colleagues here on the panel are being much more reasoned in their response to the president than the national media is. This was a situation where the president is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. So he took the right step in looking at this and saying that killing 150 people is not a proportional response to shooting down an unmanned drone. I agree with the president on that. If it had been an F-18 or a missile fired at an aircraft carrier or something like that, that's an entirely different situation and would elicit an entirely different response from the president. So kudos to the president for making the right decision, however it happened. And Iran is on notice. This president will pull the trigger. He has demonstrated that in the past. And with the advisors that he has around him, people know that he is certainly being pushed in that direction. He showed that he has the ability and desire to make a humanitarian response to this.
Even-handed, Bob says the president's growing into the job.
Well, allow me to disappoint Bob Price.
I'd be shocked if you didn't.
Because I'm glad we're not at war, obviously. However, I see scary parallels with the whole North Korea debacle. And of course, I remember his followers were saying that Donald Trump should have been nominated for a Nobel Prize for the way he handled North Korea. Well, surprise, surprise, we're back at square, actually -1, because they are ready to, get ready for nuclear war. Likewise, With Iran, I'm stunned. The followers don't want him to get a Nobel Prize for stopping the commotion he started by backing out of a contract that we kind of had in place.
That Obama started.
Well, but still, that he said he would solve, and another broken promise from the president. And what I worry about is that at the end of the day, the enemy of the people media are reporting this. Trump followers think that anything the media says is a lie. I feel we're closer to nuclear war than ever, and I really hope that our president is wise enough and smart enough to keep us out of it.
Okay, Kathleen McKinley, some clear-eyed analysis now.
So
you've heard all of this.
Everyone seems to have forgotten the Trump who was against the Iraq war vehemently. I mean, he went after it at the beginning, throughout it, afterwards. This is a guy who does not think we should get into, wars, and I don't think he wants to get into a war now. And I'm glad this panel is all agreed that we're happy that he pulled back from, although this, not necessarily would have started a war, but he pulled back from that because someone, I don't know if it was Tucker Carlson, but someone got to him and said, this is not a good idea. So we should be happy about that he made the right decision.
Okay, right decision. Up next, the president's last-minute decision to put a nationwide immigrant roundup on ice. Viewers have asked us to tackle the topic, and we'll deliver after this break. Welcome back. After telegraphing a nationwide roundup of immigrants designated by the courts for deportation, President Trump just as suddenly pulled his finger off the trigger, postponing the action for 2 weeks. Needless to say, word of the impending raids mobilized pro-immigrant forces and sparked outcries from mostly Democratic politicians, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who called the proposed deportations heartless and brutal. For his part, the president says he's hoping to leverage the delay into congressional action on asylum standards, which many see as unsustainable given the crisis on the border. Tony, what's your read on all this?
Well, this is an example of Donald Trump's mismanagement of immigration, fueling his xenophobic campaign to be reelected. The infrastructure is not there to even find 1 million people. There's not enough judges to process 1 million people. He should get his act together and get his forces together to actually handle the people already in their domain, make so that they don't die, so that they're not in terrible conditions that are an atrocity for a civilized society like America to tolerate and all that. I'm so proud of the Democrats who are giving actual proposals on how to address some of these things. And you know what Donald Trump should really be worried about if he's authentic about this? He should be worried about amnesty for illegal Americans who will continue to hire all the strong immigrants that get in here undocumented and survive the Hunger Game racket to work here in our cities, and will still get hired. They will still get hired. That's against the law. And also the illegal Americans who are buying the illicit drugs that still keep the cartels in business. That's what he should worry about.
Okay, Bob
Objection. My colleague is arguing facts, not in evidence. So the issue is these are people who have been given a final order of removal by a judge. Democrats are once again stepping forward, ignoring the rule of law, and putting aside an order from a judge that says these people were to be removed from this country. That's all that was in the 2,000 people that the president was having ICE go after in these raids. The raids are going to happen. I'm disappointed the president pulled it back because I don't think this should be a political issue. This is a legal issue. Those people have been ordered removed from the country. Many of them are violent criminals with records of rape, murder, sexual offenses against children, DWIs, things like that. These aren't just people that came here looking for a better way of life. So the president needs to take action on this. He needs to move forward with it. And Congress needs to get off its tail and fix the immigration loopholes that were created by the Trafficking Victims Reauthorization Act of 2008. Fix that law and the problem at the border goes away.
But that's not precise.
Hold on, Professor Jackson. Is this just an issue of law? I mean, they came, applied for asylum, they had their hearing, the courts have decided they should be deported. That's the stakes.
Yeah, it depends on the scale. Because the president started off the week saying he's going to deport millions and millions of undocumented persons, and that's troubling. Now we're down to 2,000, and Bob is saying that many of those folks were actual hardcore criminals, and I'm not sure if that's actually the case. of the 2000 that we're down to in terms of these rates. Now those rates have been postponed, and we'll see what happens. The Democrats and Republicans get together and come up with a bill, which won't happen. What's going to happen after that?
Okay, real quickly.
The problem that occurred here was the president wagging the dog with the million. But I'm going to agree with Bob that if there's an order of removal, the system ought to be working on that.
System doesn't work.
Gotta leave it there. Up next, breaking bad in a big way on the southern border. A tidal wave of Mexican meth headed onto America's streets. The DEA's top agent in South Texas is in our hot seat when we come back. Welcome back. His is among the most critical, most daunting missions in America, frankly, because the stakes are so very high. Nothing less than the integrity of our society and the lives of millions. Will GLASPY is the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration's special agent in charge for a region stretching from the tip of Texas to Del Rio. He joins us today to talk about a monstrous threat that's rapidly infiltrating our nation, a virtual tidal wave of mass-produced, dangerously pure Mexican methamphetamine. Agent GLASPY, welcome to the hot seat. Glad you could come and join us.
Glad to be here.
Hey, look, meth has been around for a long time, deadly and addictive, and we used to hear about it cooked up in makeshift labs. What's changed?
Well, you're right. Methamphetamine's been around for over 100 years, and in the 1970s, it was commonly referred to as kind of being produced by motorcycle gangs. But in the 1990s, the Mexican cartels, Mexican organized crime got involved in producing methamphetamine. They first started manufacturing it in California, and at the time, San Diego was considered the methamphetamine capital of the world. But Houston played no small role in this. There was a lot of methamphetamine labs here in the Houston area. But once the Mexicans got involved in it, they started producing it on a scale that the biker gangs never could conceive of. And they started producing it, the quality of it went up significantly. So essentially, since 1973, we've had the Mexicans perfecting their manufacturing process. And also, we've had them looking for ways to stop dealing with the South American organized crime, the Colombians and others, to get their cocaine, because cocaine and methamphetamine are both stimulants. So the Mexicans have looked at this as a way to be able to go from production to distribution on the street without having to deal with other organized crime.
These are businesses, these cartels. This is highly profitable for them to make the transition to this pure methamphetamine. Is that why they're doing it?
Well, if you look, 10, 12 years ago, the purity of methamphetamine on the street was somewhere under 40%. Right now, it's somewhere around 97%. The chemicals that you use to manufacture methamphetamine are relatively inexpensive when you consider the profits that are being made from the mass production of this drug.
Look, virtually pure, low cost, highly addictive, extremely profitable. If the inflow continues unabated, what are the long-term consequences for our country?
Well, as you're aware of, we've got this national opioid epidemic in the country. If it wasn't for the opioid epidemic, we'd be talking about the methamphetamine problem that we have. We've got this tremendous appetite for methamphetamine in this country, and methamphetamine is one of the most addictive street drugs that has ever been put out on the street. The difficulty in breaking that addiction for our citizens in our communities who succumb to this poison is tremendous. It's not only wrecking the individual, causing overdose deaths, but it's destroying families, it's destroying careers.
Look, we're talking about nearly pure Mexican meth mixed with other drugs. Another killer, fentanyl, coming in mostly from China. So users, I'm hearing, are playing almost a Russian roulette. They don't know what they're getting.
Well, putting the fentanyl situation to the side, if you look at what goes into the manufacture of methamphetamine, hydrochloric acid. Well, if it gets on your skin, it's going to attack your skin. Hydriodic acid, red phosphorus used to make matches, and a whole host of other chemicals that if you looked at them by themselves, you would say, why would I ever touch this stuff? But for some reason, you put all that stuff together and it creates this highly addictive substance. Now we have this problem where some of the Mexican organizations are using fentanyl which is an opioid that's 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin, and we're finding that mixed in with some of the methamphetamine.
70,000 overdose deaths in the United States last year. Those are sons and daughters and brothers and sisters. Methamphetamine, deadly. Fentanyl, deadly. What are the stakes?
The stakes are very high. We have to look at this as not just a problem that we can arrest our way out of. We have to do a better job of educating our children on the dangers of drug use, and we have to do a better job of providing treatment to those individuals who have already become addicted. Will
GLASPY, Special Agent in Charge for the Drug Enforcement Administration, thank you for being here. We hope to have you back in the hot seat.
Great. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, stay with us. There's a lot more of What's Your Point to come. Welcome back. Another week, another violent criminal reoffending after gaining release from jail under what critics are calling more lenient bond and sentencing standards in Harris County. Leading the outcry, Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo, who blasted judges and local prosecutors after it was learned a serial armed robber was granted deferred adjudication, only to be shot this week by police after an attempted carjacking.
But you start messing with giving slaps on the wrist to violent criminals, I've got a problem. Yeah, they can take a second chance once they pay their price. And paying the price ain't deferred adjudication. I mean, let me tell you something, crooks, they're no different than any other business people. Sometimes they'll do risk gain analysis, and we don't want to make ourselves an easy target.
Question, is Chief Acevedo on target, or is he overreacting? I'm going to start with Chris TRITICO.
Well, first, I like Art Acevedo. And from the day I met him, he and I generally agree on most issues except this one. I think he's overreacting to these issues. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who go before our justice system every week. And to point out, and what happened is horrible, and I'm sorry that it happened. But the judges and the prosecutors and the defense attorneys who handle these cases every week, they vet these cases, they go before the judge. The judge has every fact that they can get in making these decisions. And I don't know if this was a pre-sentence investigation or how it happened the way it did, but the decisions that are made are within the law and within the scope of the law, and the judge can't go beyond that law.
Okay, has Harris County criminal justice gone soft?
Quick answer, yes. These two cases are outrageous. Now, as Chris was mentioning, this is all within the realm of the judge's decision making. They look at the type of crime that the individual is accused of. They look at, is this guy a flight risk? They look at, does this guy have a record? Is he going to be a danger to society? And in this specific case, all of those answers should have been, yes, we need to up this guy's bond in an effort to keep this individual off the streets. Now, with that said, Greg, I think you did an interview with County Judge Hidalgo this past week, and part of her survey that she sent out to about, I don't know how many people, but I think 11,000 people responded, and 40% of those people said they felt unsafe in their neighborhoods. Well, no wonder they feel unsafe, because we're letting criminals run the streets. And here's the deal. We had a Democratic sweep in the judges, the county criminal courthouse. We have a Democrat county judge. We have a Democrat chief of police, who the chief of police is the one speaking reasonably. And these judges and these prosecutors need to get in line to keep Houston safe.
I want to hear from Kathleen real quick.
You know, I am very much for criminal justice reform. I'm for no cash bond. I'm for lighter sentencing. But when it's a serial armed robber, you know, that is not where you go in and go, let's give him a second chance. I just don't even understand that. And when you start doing that, when liberal judges start doing that, you get that whole 3 strikes you're out fiasco that we have had to live with. So it's a danger when you start letting out people who are violent criminals.
There's a lot of stereotypes.
Okay, hold on, 30 seconds. Bob, real quick.
I agree with the need for bond reform, but the issue that Chief Acevedo, and I agree with you, I like the chief, but I disagree with him on a lot of different things. In this case, I agree with him vehemently. Deferred adjudication should not be given to a repeat violent criminal offender.
Okay. Craig, you want to offer anything?
I'm just going to say I hope these are outliers. I wouldn't want to see it affect bail reform and criminal justice reform either.
Okay, Tony, I'll get back to you next segment. Okay, still to come, a push by top Democrats to legalize sex for money in America. Plus, AOC equates border detention facilities with concentration camps, sparking major blowback. Both juicy topics on our table next, so stick around. Welcome back. As we approach this week's first round of debates, Democratic presidential hopefuls made news by collectively bashing frontrunner Joe Biden and continuing to tack further and further to the left in an effort to win the hearts and votes of the ultra-progressive electorate. Exhibit A, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, who says she's open to decriminalizing sex work. Warren's hardly alone. Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and others in the Democratic field are advocating the de facto legalization of prostitution. I can tell you right now, that's not going to play too well in Waco and Waxahachie. Let's start off. Where should we start here? I'll go with Chris TRITICO.
Well, let's talk about Biden. You know, it's hard to be on top. Everybody is just gunning for him because he's leading in the polls in that Democratic primary, and every time he opens his mouth, he steps on it, and they are gunning for him. This thing that he tried to say how he can work with the other side, and he picked probably the wrong senators to show who he could work with, and they are attacking him for that. And he needs to find a way to show I can be in the middle and I can get middle America, because what his plan, I think, is I can take these middle voters who hate Donald Trump and they're not going to vote for him again, so I'm going to run in the middle and let all these other people go to the outside, and that's why they're attacking him.
Kathleen, I am really interested to hear what you have to say about, legalizing the sex trade.
Well, I don't think this is like high on our list as Americans of what's important and what we need to fix right now. I don't even know what they're thinking, why they think that's we have so many issues that we need to work on in this country. I just cannot see that this is something that we need to, let's legalize prostitution. I just don't see that really going with middle America too well. Professor Jackson.
I don't see where they're coming from on this one either. It's of course you can legalize prostitution, but why? It's not a political winner.
Not a political winner, Bob?
No. I'll tell you where else it won't play besides Waco and Waxahachie, and that's in Houston, which is the sex trafficking capital of the United States. It's ridiculous. It's not a victimless crime. There are people that are forced into it, abused in the whole process. Every week I read about convictions for underage girls that are being trafficked in this issue. The left, the Democrats are going so far left. I think half of the debate stage is going to fall off of the left side of the stage.
I'm going to go back to what Chris said earlier, and that is that people go for the partisans in the primary and then have to tack back to the middle. But these are some pretty extreme views. Your thoughts, Michelle?
Who cares? That's my thought. I mean, legalize prostitution. Let's look at immigration. Let's look at the economy. And my question is, by legalizing prostitution, will that cause an increase or a decrease in sex trafficking? And I'm sure we can look at European countries and perhaps they have some sort of guideline. But again, let's get back to real issues. Sex trafficking is an issue. Legalizing prostitution, a non-issue. And my question is, if Donald Trump is going to be so easy to beat in 2020, why are we coming up with these crazy radical ideas on the parts of the Democrats?
Crazy radical ideas? We go to Tony.
Great. How about this? We're all adults. Can we talk about the sex trade? Can we talk about sex education? Guess what? Houston already has a structure for sexually oriented businesses. If we're going to have about businesses and laws, Nevada has counties where prostitution has been regulated. And can we be adults and say, listen, let's talk about this? It hasn't gone away for all the laws you've put in place. Let's talk about regulating it so you can remove the pimps from the equation. Let's talk about regulating it because maybe then you can get rid of the diseases that are involved. And guess what? Waxahachie, there's a book by Mac McAndrews who went around Nevada and took pictures of all these brothels, and he came up with this vision that they seem pretty ordinary, but they're all in rural counties. So if it comes to Texas, it's going to Waxahachie and all these rural areas. So it's just a topic. Why should we be scared of ideas? Has it been passed? No. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it.
Good discussion. We're going to move to a new topic. The political lightning rod that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ignited once again this week after the congresswoman from New York called immigrant detention facilities on the border concentration camps.
But the academic definition of concentration camps are targeting a community and putting them in detention camps without a trial. And that's what the government is doing.
The comparison drew immediate condemnation from congressional colleagues and many Jewish leaders. Republican Liz Cheney responded, 6 million Jews were exterminated in the Holocaust. You demean their memory and disgrace yourself with comments like this. Others have rushed to AOC's defense, including at least one rabbi insisting that Ocasio-Cortez's comparison is historically accurate. I'm going to go to Professor Jackson.
The term concentration camp is a generic term, and it's been used to describe many different situations. The Ottoman Empire's genocide against Armenians. More recently, we have the situation involving the detention of ethnic Albanians in Kosovo and in Albania itself. Those camps were called concentration camps by the media, by the press, and by international human rights officials in the United Nations. That precipitated the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's 3-month bombing campaign against Yugoslavia in 1999. Furthermore, we have a situation in China, in Zhejiang province, where what the Chinese are calling education centers, the Trump administration called those concentration camps. So no, the term is a generic term. I think it should have been contextualized, nuanced, make sure that we're very clear what we're talking about. But it is a generic term, and of course, the Holocaust was the worst event in human history, and we have to recognize.
Okay, but is there a distinction here when people come knowing that they could be detained as part of a process is trying to get into this country? Bob Price.
Well, and that's the key distinction here. The incidences that you mentioned were places where countries were taking their own citizens, their own legal residents, and putting them into these camps for political reasons and for persecution. And in the case of Japanese in World War II, they were brought in there because they weren't trusted to not leak secrets to their home country or their country of origin. So this is a different situation. These are criminals who are violating American law, illegally entering the United States. They know that they will be detained when they cross that border. They do know that. It's widely publicized in South and Central America that if you come up here, you're going to be detained in this process. So it's not a surprise to anybody, and it's a completely humane process. These child kennels that you talk about, or kitty jails that you talk about, were all built under the Obama administration. So you know, it's a non-starter, and for her to use this particular phrase with the connection to what happened to the Jews in World War II is an attempt to sensationalize this and not deal rationally with the crisis, the human abuse of the people that are coming up here from these countries.
Okay, was the term incendiary?
All right, you want historical accuracy? I'll give you historical accuracy. This reminds me of Operation Wetback. Who remembers that? Who spoke up during Operation Wetback when people who looked like me were rounded up in the streets, if they were citizens or not? You want historical accuracy? Who was here when they were lynching Mexicans in Texas? Who spoke up then? So I tell you what, this bothers you? Well, I tell you what, then talk to AOC because she can handle herself. She's smart. But let's be really fair here. You're going to tolerate her metaphors for justice and you're not going to tolerate her metaphors for justice, and you're going to tolerate Trump's metaphors for discrimination? So I will have a reasonable talk with folks once you've shown me what you've done to stand up to Donald Trump's metaphors vilifying my people now. And if you've not done nothing about that first, you can't talk about this other metaphor second.
Gotta leave it there. Great conversation. Still ahead. Our panel answers the question, what did we miss? So stay with us. Welcome back. So much information, so little time. That's why each week we conclude our show by filling in a few of the gaps. I'll begin this Sunday with evidence the mayoral race is getting serious. Check out this full-page ad in today's Chronicle placed by longtime Watch Your Point contributor Bill King. you will see the names of hundreds of Houstonians, many well-known, publicly supporting King's campaign. Question now, will Turner, Busby, and Boykins try and match? And with that, I offer the question, what did we miss, Tony Diaz?
Don't miss next Sunday, the next president of the United States, Julian Castro, will be visiting Houston, Texas. Team Julian.
Kathleen.
Oberlin College in Ohio, a bakery was overwhelmed with social justice warrior protesters backed by the college, where they called them racist because they had arrested 3 young black students for shoplifting. It became a big deal and affected their business. Oberlin College just had to pay them $33 million for defamation, so it's a good win for that kind of hate crime that's going against businesses like this.
Wow, Craig Jackson.
As a son of a black World War II veteran, it appears that we've lost another of that generation, another unsung hero, one of the black soldiers who fought in World War II, one of the Tuskegee Airmen, the black fighter squadron that fought in World War II, passed away yesterday.
Okay, just about 10 seconds, Bob.
13 tons, $1 billion worth of cocaine seized in Philadelphia this week.
Got to leave it there, guys. Sorry, you guys got shortchanged. That's all the time we have, thanks to our team. And remember, keep it right here. Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace is coming up at the top of the hour. And be sure and join us next week for the latest edition of What's Your Point? Sorry, Michelle. Chris, get you more next time. Have a great week.
I wish.